Hi, this is Patty McCormick. I want to thank the Texas Librarians Association for honoring my books this way. Okay, so let's see. The first question was, how did I first hear the story about Sergeant Reckless? I was reading the newspaper one morning. It was Veterans Day, and there was a story about a man who lived in Manhattan, and he was recounting for the reporter his favorite army buddy. And he said, my favorite army buddy was actually a horse. And it turned out that this man had been stationed in Korea and was a cook for his rifle company. And they had adopted this little horse. And every morning she would come into his tent and wake him up by licking him on the face. And that was his signal that she wanted breakfast. But she didn't eat like the other horses that he had ever had any exposure to. She wanted scrambled eggs and coffee. And he came to love her so much. He made pudding for her. Anything she wanted, he made. And she would walk around the base just like one of the men. She would come into the mess hall for breakfast, for lunch, for dinner. She came into the tents at night when the men were sleeping and curl up on the floor next to the heater. And so I thought, that's a beautiful story. That's a great book, because I don't think that we are aware often of the ways that animals are used or employed or drafted, however you want to look at it, into service. And kids love learning about seeing eye dogs and security dogs at the airport or at the train station. But this story kind of went back in history. Let's see, what was the most interesting thing that I learned while researching this book? The most interesting thing I learned researching this book was that most horses have very tender, very sensitive stomachs. They get a condition called colic if any little thing is off in their feed, and colic can be deadly. This horse ate anything that was put in front of her. Maybe it's because she had been starving before the men found her. Maybe she was just more like a goat than a horse. But she was highly unusual in her appetite and in her ability to eat human food. Is there anything that you discovered about Sergeant Reckless that didn't make it into the book? There is one thing about Sergeant Reckless that did not make it into the book, and that is that the men also let her drink beer. They would share beer with her when they were playing poker. She would be in the tent. She would sit right next to them, and she wanted to take part in everything that they took part in. And she let them know that by eating the poker chips and eating the cards. So at one point, the men gave her a little bit of beer in a helmet. And she liked that. She liked it a lot. And they used it sometimes in her training. We didn't include that in the book because it's a book for children. And I feel like the reference to giving alcohol to an animal would point them in the direction of a really bad idea. But this was war, and these were men, and this was a horse who had already shown that she was like one of the men. Certainly in battle, she was like one of the men. Are there any other famous animals in the military that you might write about in the future? I don't plan on writing about any other animals in the military. I did do a little research, though, and found some other famous animals, birds that were used to carry messages. Strange things, too. The U.S. government at one point equipped cats with some kind of listening device. I don't know exactly how they did this, but the cats were then set loose in and around the Russian embassy to see if they could pick up information or or noise or conversations from the embassy. The conditions in which Sergeant Reckless was employed probably wouldn't happen again. I don't think that's done anymore. But I think the moral of this story is that the men really loved her and really treated her like one of the gang and took very good care of her. And when she was in danger, they protected her. And she responded in kind by protecting them. She carried wounded men down from the hill. She was wounded and they took care of her. She was only very slightly wounded. And then for the rest of her life, she was treated like a queen. And then the last question is, what advice would you give to young authors as they learn to improve their skills? The advice that I give to young authors is the same advice I give to myself every morning. Tune out. Turn off the internet, turn off the radio, turn off your phone, turn off anything that is going to distract you. It's important to become comfortable with silence, to become comfortable with your own company, and to see what comes in to that silence. If you have the radio on, if you have the TV on, or any number of things, your brain is receiving input from the works of someone else's imagination, and it can get kind of crowded in there. And so if your brain is quiet and if your surroundings are silent, your imagination will fill that space with amazing, magical work. Something unique, something no one else can do, something else no one else has done. That's my advice. Thanks again for this opportunity.